focus on the spirit, cause it keeps me from his fire. The Holy Ghost was with me, so my fear I leave behind. My sins were all diminished when he took that breath and died. And if you think I'ma give up on my God, the devil is a lie. The devil is a lie. The devil is a lie.
Hello, this is Christy Barr. You're watching Black Tea News. Hello. Welcome to Black Tea News. I'm your host, Christina Barr, and today we're going to be talking about wokeness versus Christianity because there were some comments that have been made as of late that I just want to address from people like Sonny Hostin and other folks that just do not ring true to Christianity. And Sonny Hostin said that being anti-woke was ungodly, and Jane Fonda said that wokeness is just caring about people, and I don't believe that's true. Or you might be caring about some people, but other people are obviously overwritten, and there's this weird hierarchy of people you're supposed to care about when it's wokeness in the order of your privilege. The less privilege you have, the more on top you are, and the more privilege you have, obviously the issues and the problems of the world are somehow your fault. So I wanted to talk about that, and I had been for a couple days, but I wasn't feeling well. April says I sound better, thank you. I still feel a little bit of a tickle in my throat, but I want to hop to it and try to get through this, and hopefully we'll get to the point where I'm all better very soon. But anyway, before I hop to it, I want to encourage you guys, go to blacktnews.com, check out different content on my website, articles, videos, etc. If you like what I do here, please consider leaving a donation on the website because it does cost a stream or on my site, all that stuff, so you guys can support. I very much do appreciate it and appreciate you guys. You guys can check out different merch that's available on the website. Got some pro-life shirts. I got this You Are Not That Special one that people find pretty funny. I do have that on a mug. And I do have a black tea mug. I have My Money, My Business. It's cool. Frederick Douglass shirt and all kinds of different things. One of my popular ones is this I'm Not the Victim You're Looking For t-shirt and other stuff. I have books that you guys can check out. There's a link in the Amazon. There's a link if you're watching on Facebook and YouTube that'll go to like an Amazon page that'll have my stuff. But I have 18 books published all together right now that you guys can check out. And I write children's chapter books all the way to like, I guess, new adult, contemporary fantasy fiction, historical fiction. And I have nonfiction books, 2 nonfiction books. One of them being, of course, God is Blatantly Against Abortion. So I encourage you guys to check out that if you have not. And if you like it, please leave a review. I know some of you guys have got some of my stuff, so I very much appreciate it and appreciate you guys very much. I do want to remind you that if you are in the southeast area in Michigan, or you want to drive, my church is having a gala to raise funds for our local pregnancy crisis center. So that's something that you guys would like to go to. I encourage you guys to go ahead and find out more information. I'll have that posted on my socials, but it's this Saturday in Pontiac at the Lafayette Grand. And we had a really good time last time and did a lot of good, not just for the Pregnancy Crisis Center that we got to donate a lot of things to the center, but also just people who came who were really, really blessed, like in extraordinary ways. I don't want to tell people's business, but at least not to the whole internet, but there's people who came who their lives were dramatically change. So it'll be a blessing to you if you come, if you can, and if you would just like to support, you guys can, of course, just like sponsor a table or something like that. Or later in the year, I'll talk more about the life drive. I had people send stuff, people who were following me on TikTok who sent things for the drive, things that were even like handmade. There was someone who did like these handmade quilts and other things, and so they donated them, and just really nice stuff. You guys are awesome. Anyway, let's hop to it. So, wokeness versus Christianity. Is it ungodly to not be woke? I would say no. I would definitely say no. It is not ungodly to be anti woke. You should be anti woke, because the wokeness is not good as far as what they promote, their hierarchy of victimhood, their lack of accountability, who they choose to uplift versus other people, like with the transgenderism stuff. And we'll break it down kind of piece by piece. But I want to start off by playing some clips. Like one of the clips that went around is very quick. So it's a Jane Fonda clip from an award show when she said that woke is just caring about people.
Make no mistake, empathy is not weak or woke. And by the way, woke just means you give a damn about other people.
Yeah, that is not the case. That is absolutely not the case. So, I want to also play Sunny Hostin before we move on. So Sunny Hostin is from The View. She says a lot of terrible things. She's one of the most. Joy Reid was probably like the worst woman, and now she has now lost her job at MSNBC. Sunny is probably the top worst now. But this is what she had to say about wokeness and Christianity the other day.
It angers me when people are like, this woke stuff, it's got to go. That's telling me that you don't care about my lived experience. You don't care about the oppression of the LGBTQ community. You don't care about the oppression of the disabled. You don't care about the oppression of immigrants. You don't care about your fellow neighbor. And that is ungodly. That is not Christian. So.
Well, yeah, but you know what the most ironic thing is? They don't care about it, and they don't care about it while wearing big fat crosses around their necks.
Yes.
Well,
yes.
You know what?
Yeah, so you don't care about the LGBT, and that's ungodly, and you'll carry your crosses around the neck, and you don't care about the lived experiences, blah, 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 blah. So this idea about needing to care about the lived experiences, you can listen to people's lived experiences, but they believe that the lived experiences of certain groups of people should supersede other voices and logic and reason and critical thinking, and also just the truth. It's always my truth. If you hear my truth, that is a flag. It's a red, and it's bright red. It's a bright red flag when people are talking about my truth rather than the truth, rather than objective reality. And it's always feelings over facts. Those are the things that are more important. So I want to go back to Jane's comment about it's just caring about people. Who are the people that we're caring about? Who gets priority? So some time ago, and I mentioned this yesterday, there was a young woman who was bathing she was showering at a YMCA. And she was startled because she heard a man. And there was a man in the shower with her. And so I'm going to go ahead and play her testimony. But this girl was attacked and looked down on. There's plenty of people who supported her, but people stood by, the woke crowd stood by the man who was in the bathroom with her. Not just the bathroom, it was a locker room. And she was showering, and she was a minor. And she also talked about how her little sister was also someone who went to this YMCA. So I asked you the question, who are the people specifically that we are supposed to just be caring about? And they mentioned the LGBT, and all these Christians are so terrible, when a lot of people concerned and looking at this transgender issue and how they're pushing it there always seems to be this priority of we have to uplift the men over the women. And it's interesting that it's on this like this hierarchy of people who they view to be kind of more important. They'll also lift, you know, trans men over men as well. Like I remember when BLM first really started making waves in very early on, and I went to their website to learn more about them, and I wasn't too fond of different stuff that I was seeing, but I went to their website, to a website or whatever of theirs to learn more. And this was years ago, like pre-Trump, and not like pre-Trump in existence, but like pre-Trump presidency. And I remember going on their website, and they were talking about men, trans men, and how they're talking about black men, but the trans men and what they go through, it's like supersedes and was more important than like the discrimination of just like men in general. So they let you know that their priorities were like on the LGBT community rather than just general or specifically police brutality. A lot of people think BLM, hey, we should be against police brutality, but they don't understand that BLM had a huge focus on the LGBT community, putting a lot of their dollars that they donate to different groups into organizations that were pro-LGBT, pro-trans, pro-drag show, like all those kinds of things that don't have anything to do with police brutality. So I always disliked BLM. I felt like I was living in a mad world in 2020. Every time I saw that hashtag on my Facebook feed, somebody was getting a lecture. I know I was probably very annoying to my friends list, but guess what? You guys were very annoying to me as I tried to spread the truth about that organization. But let me go ahead and play this young woman's clip, because most people, I think, who are normal would say, yeah, that's not appropriate. And it is scary for a young woman to be in the locker room, and then all of a sudden there's a hulking sort of figure there.
Good evening, council members and residents of Santee behind me. My name is Rebecca Phillips, and I'm 17 years old. I am not a resident of Santee, but I am employed at a local restaurant, the Omelet Factory, and I work out regularly at the Santee YMCA. Just 2 weeks ago, after finishing my shift at my job, I went to the gym to swim laps. As I was showering after my workout, I saw a naked male in the women's locker room. I immediately went back into the shower, terrified, and hid behind their flimsy excuse for a curtain until he was gone. I ran into a bathroom stall to change as quickly as I could, organizing my thoughts to share with the people at the front desk. As I did so, I could only think of my 5-year-old sister, who I bring to this gym during the summer to enjoy their water slides. This is the YMCA, where hundreds of children spend their summer afternoons in childcare camps. This is the YMCA where my little sister took gymnastics lessons. The locker room was supposed to be her safe haven to gossip with her friends and shower and change. When I asked the YMCA management what their policy was regarding transgenders, they confirmed that the man that I saw was indeed allowed to shower wherever he pleased. As long as you are not a red flag on Megan's Law, the California Sex Offender Registry, a grown male can shower alongside a teenage girl at your YMCA location here in Santee. I was made to feel as though I had done something wrong when I talked to people at the YMCA. Somehow, the indecent exposure of a male to a female minor was an inconvenience to them. When my dad spoke to the sheriff's office, they told him that he should never allow me to shower there ever again. The YMCA wouldn't let my father speak to the manager of the Santee branch. After waiting several days, he finally received a call from Terry Moss, who is the director of membership for San Diego County. She informed my dad that I was not in any danger at the time of the incident, that I was safe. But I ask you this, I'm assuming all of you either have a wife, a sister, daughters, or granddaughters, or are a woman yourself. Could you knowingly send an underage girl into a room where there was a naked male and say that she was not in danger, that she was safe, or more importantly, that this was right. The fact that we are now tailoring our privacy policies and bathroom laws around transgenders, ignoring the blatant threat to safety that this poses, is obscene. The safety of children, girls, is on the chopping block. And this issue is not unique to one political party. Both Democrats and Republicans whom I have shared this story with have all been equally disgusted. So I implore you all to take action. With great privilege comes great responsibility. Whether it's requiring transgenders to use the single-stall family restrooms or making them use the bathroom which aligns with their biological trans.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, so that was that story. So Redux, you could see their watermark on that video. They cover transgender stuff. Maybe that's exclusively what they do. But they did a story on that gentleman who came inside the bathroom. And I had covered this at the time, but I'm going to just go back over it. I may have mentioned this the other day a little bit. But someone in the comments said that this is autogynephilia, where men have an attraction to themselves in like the female form. And that's what William Thomas or Leah Thomas, who was a UPenn swimmer who swam with against Riley Gaines, has, and other folks will have. So this is the dude who is in the shower, who concerned this girl. Again, she was a minor. And they went through his social media, and he had quite a few things that were young girls who were sexualized and made gross comments about and they had other conversations with other trans dudes that were also not appropriate either. And they had blurred out a lot of the images and stuff, but they did do an article about his social media history, and it was suspect and really points to autogynephilia. And like they post pictures of like, oh, this of the girls, and people would speak out on his social media and say these images are not appropriate, and he tried to say like, oh well, these aren't sexual, and they'd belittle girls, and they'd have like off the shoulder shirts and ripped jeans, and I don't even know why. I mean, just kids dressing like really, really adult and just liking and posting things like that. So I would bank on him having autogynephilia. So I don't understand why so many people on the left who are so pro transgender movement, and there's plenty of people who are even trans who you know don't agree that they should be in like the locker rooms. Some of them believe that they pass, so they should be able to go in the bathrooms and stuff. I don't think they should. I mean, especially the male identifying ones, not just because of a safety issue. There's just like a safety security issue. That girl did not feel safe. There's an issue of privacy. Women do a lot of things in the bathroom, and this is a place where you're changing and other stuff too. But in like a normal bathroom, women, they go and they conversate. They may change themselves, be changing diapers and changing kids, or all women just spend more time in the bathroom compared to dudes anyway. But also there's just a matter of what is true, and we should be promoting the truth and making accommodations to try to affirm something that is contrary to reality, contrary to order, is wrong, and it's immoral. So I would say those are the top 3 reasons to why I don't want these Tims, the trans identifying males, into my bathrooms, into my spaces. And I don't understand why people don't want to guard people children's innocence. Like that would have been terrifying for me if I was her age or younger, but I didn't even see a naked grown man until I was like in college, and that's because I had an art class and my dad was still mad. He's like, he could have worn underwear and stuff. And I was like dreading that day, and I was so they bring the in the in the models, and for you to know anatomy and be able to draw the human form and stuff. And it was a very interesting day. But that was the first time for me. But a lot of people today, they can't say that, but I don't understand why we don't want to guard the innocence of our children more than that. I don't understand why people want to make sure that books like This Book is Gay is pushed in available in libraries for children, where they have really kind of graphic material, and they want to sexualize kids and normalize sex to these kids. And I don't understand it. I don't understand it. But again, who are we supposed to prioritize Jane Fonda and care about? Because folks will be like, oh yes, this man believes he's a woman, therefore he should go in the bathroom. But all these women who don't want that to be the case, they should just be ignored. No one cares about their lived experiences, right, Sonny? You just get to speak over those people because there's a hierarchy of victimhood and people who they deem to have more privilege or less privilege. And a black male who identifies as being trans trumps a 17-year-old girl afraid in the bathroom. So anyway, sorry, I had like a troll in the comments. I got a little distracted for a second. Anyway, let's move on. I also want to talk about this objective, like lived experiences. That's something that in critical race theory, they push as well. That it's important to just push people's subjective experience instead of actually looking at the facts and the truth of the matter. Like, here's a quote from Words That Wound, Critical Race Theory, Assault of Speech, and the First Amendment. Critical race theory is grounded in the particulars of a social reality that is defined by our experiences and the collective historical experience of our communities of origin. Critical race theorists embrace subjectivity of perspective and are avowedly political. Now, I remember doing a lot of reading and covering on critical race theory. I guess it was 2021 around that time, and people were really pushing that it's not in the schools, but the schools actually do need it, and if it's in there, it's a good thing. Like, it's not happening, but if it is, it's a good thing, was the attitude. And they were saying that critical race theory is about teaching history, and these Republicans, these folks who want to get it out of schools, are they're just racist, and they're doing it because they're racist. And I went to a picnic, and I didn't tell the people there that I was a Republican, but it was a Democrat Party picnic, and I had a conversation with the party chair for the county, and I was like, why keep pushing critical race theory? I don't understand. Why is this the hill that you guys want to die on? And I've looked into it. She admitted that she didn't look into it. And so I started talking about it. And she's like, it's just racism. They're against it because of racism. I'm like, no, critical race theory is what is racist. And they just try to keep telling you that the people who oppose it are racist. And it's just about history and so on. But it's not. It's not. Like, if you're teaching dates and times and facts, just events and things that happen, and you can talk about people's motivation and all those sorts of things, no one has an issue with that. I love history. Very fascinating. But when you have a particular lens that you're teaching it through because you want to achieve some kind of political agenda, that's what people are concerned about when it came to their children. And that's what they didn't want in the schools. It wasn't honest history. It was something that was meant to reform people's minds and change society. But they're avowedly political. So when you have an agenda and the facts don't matter and all that matters is the agenda, you get people who lose their cool and can't take reality. They can't take the actual results of data. So I've mentioned this many times, but Zach Krugman, he spoke out against BLM because BLM was pushing a narrative, not just like be better to people and, you know, police brutality is bad. They were pushing a narrative that Black people were being like hunted down, purposely targeted and executed by the police. And the sort of narrative that they were pushing and the narrative that people were picking up during this time of like George Floyd and the 2020 riots and Summer of Love and all that stuff, it wasn't obviously good for society, and the result wasn't good for society. I'm not saying there's not some good things that maybe came out of it, but it was largely, I would say, a very annoying time to be alive. But people having this distrust for the police. Like I remember seeing a video of this little girl. She saw a cop car and she it was like a security camera or whatever. She saw a cop car and she just went and she hid from it. And people were talking about how awful it was, that she was terrified of the police like that. And I'm like, yeah, it is terrible, but who gave her like that impression to like duck and cover? What if she's in a very bad situation and there's the bad guy who's after her versus a police officer, and she's ducking and covering from both people because she has such a fear of the police. Now, if you do believe that policemen are hunting down and killing Black people, like that's a hobby or something like that, or that's their job, then I can understand ducking and cover like that. But that's not the reality. So Zach Krugman, he didn't like the sort of narrative that they were pushing, and so he worked for Reuters, major newspaper. Reuters, major news organization. And he was a data scientist. And so a lot of people who were working there, they were buying into the BLM stuff, uplifting the stuff, virtue signaling in their different like chats and so on. So he decided to actually look at data involving police shootings and all those sorts of things, and wrote out a very long, very, 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 very long piece addressing BLM, their ideology, and debunking it. And he also quoted Roland Fryer, who's a Black man, and who I will play his video for you guys if you haven't seen it before. And people at Reuters lost their mind and they were uncomfortable and felt unsafe, and they were furious with his findings, and he ended up being let go from a news organization for reporting facts because it was contrary to the narrative that they wanted to believe. So I want to go ahead and play Roland Fryer's perspective on this stuff, because when he started doing the analyzing the data about police shootings, he thought it was going to be a very simple experiment and people were going to love him for saying something that, you know, everybody, I guess, basically wanted to believe or did believe. And he thought he was going to get one result, and it was contrary to his bias. So it's a fairly long clip. It's a very interesting interview. We've talked about it before on the show, but I want to go ahead and play this just so you understand when people are driven by the narrative rather than being able to look at the actual facts. There's a worldview that they believe and they want to push because they want to push this perpetual victimhood, America bad, and the racism, it's in our DNA, and we need critical race theory. Like one time during Kyle Rittenhouse's trial, Joy Reid said, "Oh, this is why we need critical race theory." I'm like, what the heck? And I wrote an article and did a video about that at the time. But they think that we need this perspective so badly when it's contrary to actual reality. And if you present data that's contrary to the reality, people get angry and want to destroy you because they can't handle the facts.
I'm one of the world's biggest data nerds. So I said, this is going to be the easiest paper I ever write. I'm going to go get some data. I'm going to go show that the police are biased. Finally, people are going to like me. And my grandmother's going to go, you showed that the police don't like black people. Really? What are you doing up there? Right? Like this was, I had it all laid out. He would just download police data and not understand more about the police. He says, I wonder what the police are maximizing. On me in that moment, I didn't know, nor did I think I cared. I said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go figure out what police maximize. So I set up ride-alongs in Camden, Philadelphia, Houston, some places in Massachusetts to ride along with the police. I just didn't like police. They came, they took half my family away. Granted, they were selling a lot of drugs, but again, not the greatest customer service. So I was biased against the police. I'm not, that's obvious. I went and I don't think I've received a better education since my grandmother taught me to read. It's a hard job. And I know that sounds obvious sitting on a stage. It's a really hard job. After 4 hours, everyone looked like a criminal to me. They were like, you could never be a cop. Because I was like, hey, let's pull over. That kid's got a basketball. I don't like it. Get a call for a potential overdose in a row house. It's an abandoned building. We bust in. A person dies within 6 feet of me. And it shook me up a little bit. And so I looked at the guys I was with and I said, yo, how about beers on me? And they said, what do you mean beers are on you? I said, I don't know. I don't know how to say it. Do you want me to speak in Greek? I mean, I don't know. It's beers are on me. We should leave here. Let the paramedics take over. We should go. And they said, we got to go back to work. And I said, but we just saw somebody die. And the police chief overheard me and he was incredulous. He says, Roland, if I gave everybody a break every time someone died, no one would cover the shifts. And I was like, wow, it is a hard job. And so through these experiences, long story short, I collected a lot of data. And those experiences helped me understand what types of data to collect. We collected millions of observations on everyday use of force that wasn't lethal. We collected thousands of observations on lethal force. And the key question, I alluded to it earlier in a bit of a joke, but the key question is not just this arbitrary, silly snapshots that some journalists, not named Barry, do a lot, which is Black people are 13% of the population and they are 50% of the police shootings. I'm sorry about that, but I don't know what that has to do with the question. Right? And it was in this moment in 2016 that I realized people lose their minds when they don't like the result. So what my paper shows, we saw some bias in the low-level uses of force, every day pushing up against cars and things like that. People seem to like that result, but we didn't find any racial bias in police shootings. Now, that was really surprising to me because I expected to see it. The little known fact is I had 8 full-time RAs that it took to do this over nearly a year. When I found the surprising result, I hired 8 fresh ones and redid it to make sure. They came up with the same exact answer and I thought it was robust. And I went to go give it and my God, all hell broke loose. Former paper published a thing, published a report about it, and it was a 104-page dense academic economics paper with a 150-page appendix. It was posted for 4 minutes when I got my first email. This is full of shit. Doesn't make any sense. And I wrote back, how'd you read it that fast? That's amazing. You are a genius. People lost their minds. I mean, it was like colleagues of mine were going, well, I don't believe these results. He's using regressions. I'm like, well, what the hell else we've been using? I mean, we've been using them for ever. That's what you use. And I had colleagues take me to the side and say, don't publish this. You'll ruin your career. I said, what are you talking about? I said, what's wrong with it? Do you believe the first part? Yes. Do you believe the second part? Well, the issue is they just don't fit together. We like the first one, but you should publish the second one another time. I said, let me ask this. If the second part about the police shootings, this is a literal conversation. I said to them, if the second part showed bias, do you think I should publish it then? And they say, yeah, then it would make sense. And I said, I guarantee you I'll publish it. We'll see what happens.
So he did publish it and people didn't like it, lost their minds. And he got in trouble for there's a short documentary on YouTube about him getting in trouble for like something else, and then he was like put on leave. Now he had tenure, so they couldn't get rid of him, and so he's, I think, back to teaching and stuff. But his conversation with Barry was very interesting, not just about the paper that he published, but also like meritocracy and DEI and things like that. And he just had an interesting perspective with more nuance than people on the just things I think that people on the right need to consider when having those conversations. So I recommend that you guys go, find like those full interviews with Roland Fryer. But anyway, they didn't like the result and they flipped out because it was counter to the narrative that they were believing, that they were pushing. And I'm not surprised people lost their minds because we see that often. I also want to play something else as well while we're on the subject of people believing things and saying things that are contrary to reality. Now, this clip was from a Michael Knowles interview with a abortion activist. He was a young medical student. And it was a fascinating interview, especially how she tried to trick Michael and his audience about abortion. And she showed like a photo, of a petri dish, and she's like, this is what an abortion actually looks like. And it was just like tissue from like after the abortion or whatever, and that had been cleaned up. And so there was a propaganda paper or whatever that I think was published in The Guardian that was very viral. I can't believe people still bring it up. But Michael's just like, how'd the baby get in the tube? He's like, you're like literally showing a crime scene. Like if you suck a baby through a tube that is smaller than it is, it's not going to look like a normal baby when it's been sucked out that kind of way. And then you clean it all up and there's just like tissue from the sack and all that other stuff left. Like why are you a medical student trying to pull one over on everybody? There's women who've had miscarriages who have seen their little teeny tiny baby come out of them, even women who are pro-choice who have debunked some of those photos. So it was a remarkable interview, but this is the portion of it that many people remember and they talk about.
Michael, do you know what the leading cause of death for pregnant people is?
Pregnant people?
Mm-hmm.
Mothers? Women?
If you'd like to call them mothers, not all of them are mothers, but if you'd like to call them that.
What are they if they're not mothers?
They're pregnant people.
What people other than mothers are pregnant?
Does it bother you to use inclusive language?
Well,
It's just interesting.
I prefer to use precise language.
It's interesting because you come into this conversation, trying to hold this moral superiority. But then
I try to be moral when I can, but
Right, but when I use inclusive language, which it only takes a couple extra syllables to use inclusive language,
To include
and
who?
it seems to include people who don't, identify as women but can become pregnant.
So, like a person who's born a woman and then identifies as a man and is pregnant.
Yeah.
So you're telling me that in order to be a moral person, I need to accept the idea that a man, someone who is born a man and looks like a man, can really become a woman. That's a prerequisite of my being a moral person.
So, yeah, they didn't play it. That I thought there's more to the clip. And so, after that, Michael had said, okay, I identify as being correct on this issue. I'm the right one on this issue. Will you respect my identity? And she said, that is not your identity, Michael. And he said, oh, I guarantee you that is my identity. So are you going to acknowledge my identity? So it's interesting that in order to be a moral person, you have to accept this lie, this thing that is contrary to reality, in order to be a good person in the eyes of the woke. But again, it's something that is not true. So the Bible talks about how we're not supposed to be conformed to the ways of the world, but we're supposed to be transformed by the renewing of our mind. We're not supposed to want to be like Bronte. We're not supposed to want to be like the gentleman who went into the YMCA and scared the young miner. We're not supposed to want to be like Sonny Hostin. We're not supposed to want to be like them. We're supposed to want to be like Christ, and following this let's appease everyone's feelings, even though they're seeking after something that's disordered. That's obviously the wrong route to go. That leads to serious, I would say, consequences. But you have to be moral in their opinions. And you have to accept all this stuff. It's funny when they'll talk about, when they bring up Christianity, they'll bring up things like, well, they'll say, judge not, which they don't read the rest of that passage. Because the Bible doesn't say you can't judge. Like I don't get the final say in whether someone or not is getting to heaven. That's out of my purview. And I don't really judge what is evil, not evil, but you can, God, you can read the word and see what God says is wrong and right in there. I don't have to make it up. I can refer to the same source that you can refer to. And by the way, it's also, the law is also written on our hearts. So I'm not judging what is right or wrong, but I can look at what is right and what is wrong, and I can see what kind of fruit you're bearing on your tree. And just with logic and reason, or just basic discernment, which is encouraged, you can know a tree by its fruits, right? And say that you are in error. You are in error. And in the passage where Jesus is actually teaching about judgment, I can correct you, try to get you on the right path. But the purpose of that passage that they always quote is that Jesus is trying to put everything in order so you can judge correctly, because he was talking about hypocrites who will talk about you and you have specks in your eyes while they themselves have a big old beam. And so you you have to deal with the beam in your own eye before you deal with their specks. Like that's the correct thing to do. But it's not saying you can't ever judge someone else and call them out and try to get them on a path of correction. So they'll talk about that. They'll say you can't judge while they're obviously judging you. And they'll also bring up, well, what about love thy neighbor? Like Miss Rachel, who's a big, child content creator. And a lot of people like Miss Rachel. I didn't know who Miss Rachel was until probably until this controversy about her talking about the LGBT community and like propping them up and stuff. And so she justified it and said, I'm a Christian and we're supposed to love our neighbor as we love ourselves. And she called it the greatest commandment. Well, the thing about that, though, is it's the second greatest commandment, is to love your neighbor as you love yourself. The first greatest commandment, though, according to Jesus, is to love God with all your heart and your mind and your soul. So you have to have that correct balance and that correct perspective. If you want to properly love yourself and your neighbor, you have to put God first. And how do you love God? You love God by keeping his commandments, right? So, and if you want to love your neighbor, I had replied to her video and I said, we need to love people out of hell, not cradle them into it. So trying to be so, oh, I'm so kind and I'm so nice or whatever. I'm going to say things that affirm you and make you feel comfortable so you can keep living the life that you're doing and you can know that you're supported in the sin. And I'm like, no, I want you to pursue perfection. Like we're not going it's hard to do. Like we can't reach that. That's why we needed Jesus to pay it all, because we can't reach that level of perfection. We've all fallen short. But sin, and I got into this conversation the other day, but sin, it's in the Greek, the word is about missing the mark. Like you're literally like you have an arrow and you're missing a target. And so I was talking to someone because they're like, everybody sins. I'm like, yeah, but there's a difference between trying and you miss the mark that you're aiming for versus I don't care if I hit the target at all. I'm not even going to take aim. I'm just going to do whatever I want to do and live however I want to live. That's not the right way to go. And if you truly love someone, the Bible talks about love, and that love is patient, that love is kind. But it also talks about how it doesn't rejoice in wrongdoing. So if you're rejoicing in someone's wrongdoing and helping leading them down a path of damnation, it's not because you love them. It's because, I don't know, maybe you find virtue and like a pat on the back, like, oh, look at me, because you're not pointing to God when you're pointing them and helping them down a pathway that will lead them from eternal separation from him. So you're doing that for you, not because you love the Lord. And if you don't properly love the Lord, then you don't properly love your neighbor. So those are the things that they'll talk about. I'm sure those are the sorts of things that Sunny is thinking about when she's saying it's ungodly not to care about the LGBT people. I care about all people, and I want all people to know the Lord, to have a relationship, to know that Jesus Christ is Lord and that he is a savior. I want everyone to get there. But I'm not going to say that Leah Thomas or Dylan Mulvaney are women. I'm not going to do that. And that is not the requirement to get the I love people badge that apparently they're passing out. That is not the requirement. So the woke stuff really buys into being contrary to reality. It buys into the victimhood classes. It buys into the my truth instead of objective reality and the truth. It buys into privilege. And again, the less privilege you have, the more they want to uplift you. It doesn't look much at personal responsibility and accountability. One reason that a lot of folks like Ben Shapiro have really been railing against DEI is because of the ideology behind that. Like he went on Jubilee and he said that I think his prompt was that Kamala Harris is a DEI high, in her perspective on DEI is dangerous or whatever to the country. And so some people just wanted to go on there and score points. Like there was this kid, Dean, who tried to say that the Electoral College was DEI, and he was, I don't know, just trying to dunk and score points and not really address the real argument. And one guy, and I did a video about this, who was talking to Ben, but they put the flags up relatively quick. He actually asked clarifying questions like, what do you mean? What do you mean by this? And so Ben said, the issue with DEI is that we will look at outcomes that are not equal, and it will be assumed that the reason for those outcomes have to do with racism, instead of looking at the actual issues and seeing where the disparities might occur and actually solving the issues and solving the problem. And that's a real issue. And that's something that was mentioned in Project 2025, by the way. And I agree. Like, if you just look at different outcomes between like white people, black people, or so on, and you're like, oh, there must be racism here, instead of looking at different cultural issues and behaviors or economics or things like that and trying to address those situations individually, you're not going to be able to actually solve the real problem if all you're screaming is racism, racism, racism. So that's the issue that he had with DEI, but people just want to protect it so tightly that they didn't even want to have a proper conversation about it. It like you could talk about different outcomes that are different between the black community and other communities. And if someone says, "Hey, what about like fatherlessness in the homes?" and other people will start to lose their cool if if you start to bring up some kind of like thing that socially, culturally in the community that people can do that will lead to better outcomes, because they want the government to just come in and start passing laws that pick winners and losers. In the Democrat Party platform back in 2020, I don't know if it's still in there right now, but they talked about how they don't believe in neutral race policies to correct what they feel are systemic issues. So they don't want the law to treat everyone the same. They're okay with discrimination and treating people unequally to gotta ghetto rig their sense of restorative justice. And I don't believe that's correct. I don't believe that's right. People are accountable for their own actions. People are accountable for their own sins. And those things do lead to societal decay and disruption. I want to go back to this idea about wokeism and how it's against the natural order. If you're going to talk about Christianity, we could go back to Genesis, and we know that God made male and female, correct? Genesis 1:27 says, so God created man in his own image, and in the image of God, he created him, male and female. He created them. So we're image bearers of God, and there's only male and there's female. And in humans, it's not interchangeable. It's not interchangeable. Okay. And sex and gender are meaningfully intertwined. If you looked at the etymology of the word gender, it was just a flipped out word of sex. This idea of unmarrying the two. It's funny that they want to unmarry gender and sex, but they keep pairing them together anyway. Everybody knows that they're meaningfully intertwined. But a man can't become a woman can't become a man. You're identifying your way into it doesn't change anything. Your willpower doesn't change anything. How you perceive reality doesn't change actual reality and biology. So, wokeness will tell you that that's what I said was wrong. Wokeness will tell you that that isn't loving, that I'm not using inclusive language, and I don't know, am a fascist who hate people, all kinds of stuff. Michael Knowles was on Jubilee, and it was him versus 25 people like LGBT like activists and stuff, and he cooked them. I've seen quite a few Jubilee videos, and I don't think I've ever seen one that was so one-sided with the people who got up there. And people who are like decent debaters dealing with other conservatives, they just fell flat on their face. Michael has he has a really good debate style, and he's really cool, and under, I guess it wasn't pressure. It was like just a breeze, and people were just insisting. Like there's this one kid, Mason, who's like, oh, there's all these other cultures that had different ideas of gender, and he's like the Mayans. And Michael's like, okay, what did the Mayans say? And then he didn't know, so he was like, well, there's just other things you can say. He's like, okay, but what did the Mayans say? You brought up the Mayans. He's like, what is this, trivia night? And he was obviously trying to get out of the fact that he brought up the Mayans and didn't know anything about them. And Michael pointed out that all these people will say stuff like, oh, all these cultures have had all these different ideas about gender and sex and marriage. And he's like, and what they claim to be is not so in marriage between a man and woman, or male and females, for the structure of creating families has been around forever, and that has been the understood um, formation of marriage until just really recently in human history. And so the Bible talks about how Genesis 2:24, therefore a man shall leave his father and his mother and shall hold fast to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. And they're supposed to be fruitful and multiply. And so wokeness really does attack this sort of order, the structured order. Um, and it also attacks biology. People will get mad about just actual biology when it comes to the transgender issue, but they're also mad about biology when it's just like puberty. People will talk about puberty and how they need puberty blockers because it's torturous to just go through their natural puberty, that people don't consent to it, therefore they should be able to take the puberty blockers, these children, and to disrupt their development because it's biology is mean, it's cruel, and people do the same thing when it comes to abortion too. Women, when they talk about pregnancy, I didn't consent to this. Like, it's a biological process. Like, you probably consented to the action of procreation, and someone was procreated. And like, well, I should be able to decide when I'm a parent. I agree. That's why you should have worn the condom, or that's why you should have remained abstinent if you weren't ready, or should have pulled out, or she should have been on birth control. You should have took precautions. And they're not the only thing that's 100% is actually not having sex, I guess. But but a lot of people they don't even take the precautions, and they have an oopsie baby, and they're like, I should be able to decide. Well, I agree you should be able to decide. I agree that you have bodily autonomy. But once the child is created, the time to decide whether you're going to be a parent or not, it should be over. Because the reality is, it's upon you now. Your offspring is inside you. And then they act like they're being attacked by their own child. And they'll call it a clump of cells. And then they'll invent like crazy theories about the heartbeat. And like Stacey Abrams, who was running to be governor twice in Georgia, like acted like the heartbeat is it's not really a heartbeat. It's a sound that's structured by men who don't want women to decide. It's like, there's not a bunch of men sitting in a back room somewhere twiddling their mustache and like, we want to control women, so we're going to manufacture every single heartbeat because it's not real when you go into a doctor's office. It's just nonsense. And people don't want to believe when your origin of life begins, when at conception, and they just want to deny all sorts of biological facts to be able to have some kind of right to unalive their children. There's a hatred of the natural order. And we're men and women, they both have different, they're not the same. They're not the same. They have different sort of roles in society. And I would say that they're complementary to one another. And every child has a mother and every child has a father. That's how it is biologically, just plain speaking facts. But that's something that they ought to be able to have. But you have people who don't believe that's the case. I mean, if different situations happen, like the father walks out, or someone dies, or you didn't know that they were some kind of like complete total scumbag and you have to raise them alone. Things happen in life. But we should be planning to create a flourishing society. And that sort of result that we want, that should be good, requires some thought about who we bring into the world and how. And once you bring that child into existence, parents have certain obligations to their children. But in the world of woke, we sacrifice our children for our own benefit, whether it is for something like abortion or with this transgender ideology stuff. like with so many parents, like, oh, my kid was always trans. At the age of 3, I knew my kid was trans. Really? At 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, etc. Like, I'm not gonna raise my kid with a gender. They'll let me know when they're ready. We shouldn't be raising them into gender constructs. You don't think you're raising it into some kind of construct by deciding not to refer to them as a boy and a girl until they point to pink or blue, or I don't know how you're going to determine that. Disrupting their natural order of their development. Now, if you just leave them be and let them grow up, many of these kids who have some kind of confusion will grow out of it. But when you disrupt them and you put them down a path and you affirm their delusion, and you find doctors who are financially incentivized to affirm their delusion, and maybe they're like just ideologically incentivized to do that too, you can lead your kid down the path of chopping off their breasts, getting surgeries for the bottom, and so on. Chloe Cole, who's a detransitioner, very famous detransitioner, you know, she was in it. Her parents were in it. The doctors told her parents, hey, if you don't do this, then, you know, your kid is going to unalive himself. And would you rather have an alive son or a dead daughter? So they consented. And she was on puberty blockers when she was young. And she also had her breasts chopped off. And she's talked about how that's led to different physical side effects that she finds to be, you know, embarrassing and upsetting nowadays. But she regrets that happening to her, and she speaks for children and parents and so on today, hopefully so they don't make the same mistake while they're caught up into all of this nonsense. And there's kids who will really push, and they'll find a way to even be separated from their parents. Maybe one parent is okay with it. There was a woman in Illinois. She was I don't know if she was ever married, but her partner, her male partner, ex-partner, got with this I think psychologist or something, and they started putting ideas in her daughter's head, and the daughter said she was a boy, and the woman, she's on the left, but she just wouldn't accept an idea or an affirmed idea that there was something wrong with her daughter's body, that she would have to start taking hormones and do surgery and other things to change it. And she ended up losing custody of her child. She lives close to her daughter and can only contact her by letters. And of course, there are cases where there have been fathers who have lost the custody of their children, and the mothers have them, and they're going to put them through gender surgery and all, and hormones and all kinds of things, and the fathers can't do anything. So we sacrifice our children to these ideologies instead of making sacrifices for them. And you get to say, oh, I'm inclusive. Oh, I'm so caring. Oh, I understand them. You get to virtue signal. You get to virtue signal instead of actually being righteous and virtuous. And Jesus didn't take too kindly to people who wanted to look virtuous in the eyes of the people, but really didn't care about real righteousness. People who would want to pray loud just to be heard. All you people who blacked out your social media icon in 2020 and put a black square. Many people who wanted to be known as being virtuous, all they're doing is doing a little post here, a hashtag there. People letting folks know, like, hey, I'm fasting. That's why I look like crap and all this stuff. I'm out here fasting. I want you to know. Like, no, you do it. You're supposed to act good and do good because it's the right thing to do. But many people just want to appear good. They're doing things for social credit scores, not because it's right. Not because it's right. Um, Another thing about wokeness, um, there's the parable of the talents where Jesus talks about how um, there was a servant, different servants, and they all got different um, units of money that they invested in different ways. But there was one servant who was terrified of screwing everything up, so they just like hid theirs. They didn't invest in anything. They just, and they did multiply their master's money. And so that was the wicked servant, and they took that, they gave it to the servant who had the most and did the most with it, so they could take that and go make more. So I think there's a message about meritocracy there that you could take, that everybody isn't always given the same thing. People are given things uh, to accommodate their actual capabilities. And I'm not saying that people should um, do charity, should take care of others and teach others and uplift them. There's plenty of scriptures in the Bible that talk about personal charity. But the wokesters or the folks on the left, or just Christian Democrats, they'll try to do the charity and insist that it has to go through government rule. Like, oh, we have to be kind and compassionate to these people, therefore we're going to vote into all these social programs. And I'm not bringing this up to diss like social programs overall or anything like that. But it's not charitable to confiscate other people's money and to then redistribute it to folks. And maybe you're getting some yourself, not paying taxes. Who knows? What is charitable is for you to reach into your own pocket and for you to do good to others yourself. And those sorts of things are encouraged all the time in the Bible, obviously. Like Rand Paul will say, if you say that healthcare is free, like I'm a physician, are you saying that I'm not supposed to be paid, or I'm supposed to be like enslaved to the state and do this work and stuff, maybe that I don't want to do, or not be paid for it, or whatever? Like, that's slavery, just to assume that you're entitled to my labor, right? But he does give his labor to those in need because he's a Christian and he feels that is his calling to actually help people who financially need the help. And they'll do free eye exams and other things like that, and surgeries and whatnot, because that is his duty as a Christian. But he is against the state saying that you have to do this, because when they say that you have to do this, then it's indentured servitude. So there's lots of things about wokeness that I just believe are contrary to the Bible, to the gospel. God cares about equal justice, like real equal justice, not just the restorative justice. God is no respecter of persons. The gospel is for everyone. Everyone falls short. Everyone is responsible for their own sins. Even the Israelites, when they were enslaved by the Egyptians, God did deliver them, and his heart was for his people. But these people also sinned themselves. And the Bible even talks about how the sins that they committed in Israel were turning to other gods. Now, these are people enslaved by people who worshiped other gods. And God didn't go like, it's just everybody else's fault. You guys were enslaved. It's cool. It's cool. I understand. I understand societal times and all that. Like, I'm gonna let that slide. No, like, no, they did have to pay for their sins, and that's one of the reasons why they had to participate in the Passover. So he did give a way, an option for them to be forgiven for their sins, which, by the way, God does that for everybody. But the debt does need to be paid. The sin does need to be acknowledged, and the debt does need to be paid. is not just someone else's fault because you're in an oppressor-oppressed relationship. And the most dysfunctional sort of, I don't know, worldview that I could think of recent time right now is people's coddling of like the Palestinians and the excuses made for the terrorists that came in and committed a massacre of the Israeli people on October the 7th, and how they came in and they killed women and children and fathers and grandfathers and kidnapped grandmas and babies and did terrible things to women and starved people, all kinds of different things. And you had folks on the left. There was I think it was Harvard, or there, I want to say it was Harvard, but there was a group of like students that put together a letter, and they were like, "Oh, we're not really for them, but it's kind of Israel's fault." Like people were making excuses because they were living in an open air prison, and when you have all these years of subjugation, like you can only take so much. Like, no, you have the law written on your heart, and you make a decision on whether you're going to do right or wrong. And the methods and the tactics that they used were just barbaric, and we've seen them continue to be barbaric. The two children that they returned their bodies, and they were supposed to return their mother to, and the mother, it wasn't their mother, it was some other body. They did eventually, I believe, get the mother's body, but they even had propaganda leaflets in the coffins of the children, and they do these sick propaganda sort of parades to humiliate the Israelis before they give them back. And it's just remarkable the sort of excuses that are made. But very early on, when all this was happening, you had people who were on the left, who were BLM and Queers for Palestine, all these like left focused people who were taking up for the aggressors in the situation, who did this terrible stuff because in their view, in their dynamic, the Palestinians are the oppressed and the Israelis are the oppressor, and they have to, respect their matrix, how their system, and so they have to defend. They have to defend the people who they feel are the victim, even though they did this terrible stuff. And they'll say things like, "Well, I don't condone what they did," but then there's a ginormous but that really excuses the actions that occurred. So people have very skewed perspectives when it comes to right and wrong, because of this woke mentality that has plagued our society for some time. And people in the comments have mentioned, this is Marxism, it's Marxism, and BLM is Marxism. Yeah, a lot. Yeah. It is for sure. I'm going back to the critical race theory and the oppressed oppressor sort of, you know, uh, mentality and all that stuff. Yeah, absolutely. The demoralization of society. Yeah, that's classic KGB tactics, and absolutely. And in those sorts of society, um, Christianity, they'll tolerate it for a little bit, and they'll give you some watered down fake stuff with the people who are willing to cooperate. But the people who want to preach the real gospel, those are the ones that they have to eventually kill and get out of there, because it's a disruption on their end game and their agendas. I was talking to someone last weekend about color communism and common sense, and there was a man who a black man who wrote this book, who defected from communism and stuff, but he talked about how the communists had a goal basically to make black people trash, like a trash kind of community. And they would recruit black people with like real concerns about racism. But their goal could never really be to fix their community. Their goal had to be to push communism. And they would set you up So in case you wanted to defect, they could delegitimize you with, oh, we hooked you with this white woman or whatever and had an affair. So if you, it's all gonna come out, or if you defect, and then we're gonna, ruin your reputation. On, like, they had contingency plans for people who, wanted to defect or whatever, to keep people in line. But the goal wasn't ever to make the Black community strong. And they would even derail certain plans when Black people want to get together, like, hey, let's get together, pull our money together, build a hospital and do this and or whatever, banks or what. And they be like, nah, you shouldn't be doing that. You should try to get the government or somebody else to do that for you. They didn't want them to be self-sufficient. They didn't want people to be able to control their own destinies. They didn't want that. So, it's this sort of stuff has been going on a very long time. But to Jane Fonda and Sonny Hostin, it's definitely not Christianity. The first kind of quote I saw the other day, and Peter Thiel had said something about wokeism being a ultra form of Christianity, and it's religious, but I wouldn't say it's an ultra form of Christianity.
Christianity, the main religion of the Western world, it always takes the side of the victim, and there's something where it is like some kind of deformation or intensification, and maybe you should think of wokeness as ultra Christianity or hyper Christianity. It's just like an extreme intensification, and it's maybe there's no forgiveness, and so it's sort of it's you still have original sin, and you have all these bad things that happened in the past. The past is terrible, and you can never overcome it. But there surely is a religious interpretation that this is sort of, what happened is, as let's say the church lost a certain amount of authority, but people didn't become, rationalist atheist people. They went into the sort of woke religion, which has to be which I would interpret as a certain extreme form of Christianity.
Yeah, because
there's a religious interpretation. There's an economic one. That, it's...
So here's the issue with, if you look at like the new atheism stuff, like Dawkins and Hitchens and Sam Harris, who seems to very much lost his mind to Trump derangement syndrome. They were really antagonistic toward Christianity and wanted, I don't know, some kind of secular society. But the truth is that people are always trying to fill the God-sized hole in their heart, and people are just kind of naturally religious, and it's just a question of what God are you going to serve. So this idea that people are just going to reject all religion and just have some kind of super secular rational society, that's just not how it goes. It's not how it goes at all. And I would reject the idea that wokeness is just some kind of ultra Christianity. Like you said, there's things like no forgiveness, and there's things like original sin, and things like that. But it does operate in a religious sort of way, but there's obviously other religions besides Christianity. But wokeness very much focuses on the self and appearing virtuous to other people and buying in other people's feelings and other things like that, and rejecting truth and order and other things like that. But Christianity is very much God focused. It's very, what's the duty of man? The whole duty of man: to love God and to keep his to fear God and to keep his commandments. The whole duty of man. It's looking toward him. It's about crucifying your flesh. It's about denying yourself. It's about taking up your cross daily. Like, go read about how horrific and violent and terrible a crucifixion is. Go read about how terrible that death is, how brutal it is, that the Romans did, and how you're basically ending it with suffocation. It's just a really brutal process. And think about how you need to crucify yourself daily. It's about dying, yourself dying. That is so not woke. That is so not woke. When you uplift your feelings above everything else, no, those feelings are supposed to go on the altar and you're supposed to slay it. Your feelings have to be slain. You don't have to wait to the cross to figure that out. You go back to Abraham. Your feelings are supposed to go on the altar. So I don't see it as an ultra form of Christianity at all. I see it as really, really the opposite. And Peter Thiel, um, I would say that wokeism is really the side effect of trying to live in this hyper secular atheistic world. Because again, people will worship something. There was a debate. I've talked about it before. I just now realized that this person who did this debate is Andrew Wilson. I wasn't familiar with him at the time, and I think this was just maybe, what year was this? This was 2000. It was just a year ago. It was just a year ago. It was November 2023. So let me share my screen so you guys see this. I'd have to find, I don't know the right spot to go to. So I always said I wanted to do a video about this. So I'm not going to dive into it today, but Andrew Wilson did a debate with this atheist who's pretty popular, Matt Dillahunty versus Andrew Wilson. And it's so funny knowing that it's Andrew Wilson now. And they were discussing what's better for society, secular humanism or Christianity. And so Andrew Wilson, Matt was like, Christianity is bad. The new Speaker of the House, he's against homosexuality and all these different things and blah, blah, blah. And he's going on and on and on and on. And he does his opening. And then Andrew Wilson is like, okay, let's just grant the premise that Christianity actually isn't true. We should still act like it's true because secular humanism leads to disorder. And then he starts talking about gender identity and ideology and all those kinds of different things. And Matt is, I guess, from my understanding, maybe with a trans person. And so he was so offended that he rage quit the debate. He just rage quit the debate. And then Andrew just did the rest of the debate by himself and just did a Q&A with a crowd. And there are people in the audience who were like, why'd you say that was so mean or whatever? But nobody could really like address his points. And it was really an incredible thing to witness if you haven't seen it before. But it was Modern Debates, if you want to look it up later. But this secular human, society where they're just pursuing human flourishing is like, well, who gets to determine exactly what that is based on whose subjective experience? And you get to the point where you're like, men can be women, and if you want to be if you're a man and you want to be a convincing woman, you got to start as early as possible, and then you start talking about minors being able to transition and altering their bodies in ways that they can't understand and in ways that they would most likely grow out of if you left them alone, and then they change, and it doesn't really affect the rate of which people unalive themselves. And there's more data coming out all the time about this stuff. There was someone who hid a study because they didn't want the results to be used against the transgender movement. So the atheist opinion on the world doesn't the atheist utopia that they've been searching for just isn't a thing. And Richard Dawkins, who's all part of the God delusion, that was his thing. He's now saying, oh, I miss Christian Christmas. I'm a cultural Christian. And other atheists have realized that they've made a mistake. And some of them haven't come to believing in Christ, but some have. And they're like, we made a big mistake and we need Christianity. And a lot of these social ills that have been going on, including the wokeness and also radical Islam, they can be combated with Christianity. So appreciate good things that Peter Thiel has done. You know, and like Trump's wins and JD Vance and all kinds of different stuff like that. But I think I don't know. He needs to study some more about Christianity, I suppose. How does the inevitable depopulation make the species flourish? That is something that is mentioned in these debates. I believe Andrew brought that up. Inspiring Philosophy did a debate with a atheist physicist at the last debate con, and IP, he just he wiped the floor, man. He all the Christians. I didn't watch Andrew Wilson's debate, but it sounded like I saw pieces of David Woods, but they weren't. He wasn't really debating against an atheist, but Inspiring Philosophy and Apostate Prophet, they cleared. So the Christians did well at debate con for sure this year. And I think they'll continue to do so because people are seeing that atheist utopia not really working out. Anyway, that's the show for today. I hope that was a good enough kind of rant for you guys. And Sunny and Jane Fonda, they just need to take a seat. They need to get different people on The View, but they don't like hearing a lot of conservative voices. Meghan McCain would talk about how hard it was to get people that she wanted to come on the show, you know, and they really didn't treat Meghan McCain very well. So I wonder how they would handle a pretty darn traditional conservative Christian conservative like me if I was to have a discussion with them. But I think Sunny is like the worst. Anyway, that's all I have for you guys. Please go to blacktnews.com, check out different content on the website, different articles, videos, etc. If you like what I do here, please consider leaving a donation on the website because it does cost a stream and run my site, all the good stuff you guys can support. I very much appreciate it. Appreciate you guys. You guys can check out different merchants available on the site. You guys can also check out my books that I've written. I have 18 altogether that are published, including, of course, God is blatantly against abortion. Thank you guys for your time. And thank you to those who watch back later. And I will see you tomorrow.